Hello there, this is part of an initiative that I've been challenged with to create some more long-form content. Let's see if it sticks. Today we're going to be talking about Dungeons & Dragons, specifically the narrative side of Dungeons & Dragons. I've been asked on TikTok if I can create some longer form content. This is going to be a longer form video about one of the topics that I discussed over there, which is the difference between a character story and a world story. For those of you unfamiliar with how this kind of is going to go, I want to break things down for you so that if you are a new DM, a DM who's already here, a player, an aspiring person who's going to start playing Dungeons & Dragons either as a Dungeon Master or as a player, you are aware of how you can integrate or be a part of the integration process of incorporating you, your character, or another person's character into the world and the story in a more seamless way. And the purpose of doing this is that while you go throughout a story, your character will have callback moments to who they've been, and also will be able to progress along an individual story so that you can see some personal merit, improvement, challenge throughout your campaign journey. So that's kind of the point, is that your character is challenged, or that a character is challenged personally in a way that is unique and distinct from what the actual story's conflict is at large. So let's talk about it. Within a Dungeons & Dragons game, or any TTRPG, there is a world, there is a location where the story takes place. If we're going with a real D&D campaign, this is Toril, the plane of existence where the Forgotten Realms are, all this other stuff, the Sword Coast, things of that nature. All the modules that I believe are written for D&D, for the most part, exist somewhere on that plane of existence, with the exception of maybe some things like Planescape, but we're not going into that. The point is that within any narrative, there is a world. And then we go about creating the story. If you want to think about this like a book, you'll need good concepts and good things to articulate what is in the world, what is present in the world, and then you can use that to inform the challenges that any person, anything in the story would face. Chief among these is, of course, your players. So let's talk about this through the lens of a pre-written story. If you are someone who is looking to create a campaign, start a campaign, or you're in a campaign, there is a story that you'll need to have, something to bring the players together and allow them to do things. Whether this is a more loose story or a more concentrated story is kind of up to you, but we're going to go with a more condensed, more concentrated one, which has like a bit of a through line. Oftentimes this through line can be misconstrued with railroading, depending on how badly or how well it is done. But in this instance, I want to talk very specifically about the narrative being the thing which the players will be trying to go down, and you will be able to deal with the actual process of integrating that naturally. And what we want to talk about is integrating other things into that narrative. So, for each of your characters, for any character, for you if you're personally creating a character, or for any other character, you'll have to create a race, a background, and a class. Those things really are good at informing who your character has been, but I'm personally a Dungeon Master, and my players, there is specifically one player in my group that does not frequently create compelling backgrounds for themselves. I really have to kind of coax it out of them. And so when you create this narrative, race, class, background, there's something really interesting that you get to consider. And we're just tangenting a little bit here. Who your character has been. Because most characters in any world do not possess class levels, which means they do not have that kind of power. And you can include that in your story, especially if you're playing a campaign and you're starting at a higher level. You've had learned experience, and I'd recommend looking at the stages of play, which is like levels 1 to 5, 6 to 10, 11 to 15, 16 to 20. Depending on what level you're entering the campaign at, your character has done things qualifying that level of play. 1 to 5, you've probably saved you've saved like a townstead. Levels 5 to 10, you've probably saved the kingdom. Levels 15 to 20, I think you've probably saved like a region. And levels 10 to 15, you've saved a region. Levels 15 to 20, you've saved the world, like, or the multiverse, whatever it may be. Now, how does this fit with your character story? Well, that informs your background, who you've been. And that's really, really important, because who you've been, you can then take that as a conversation. Either you as the DM can broach your player and go, okay, I know what your background is, and I've seen how you've been playing. Or you can just say, I see how your background is. What things do you want to challenge yourself with? Is there part of your background that you want to see explored in the narrative? And whatever they say, you then take that and try and incorporate it into the story. I'll give you some examples. So let's say that you have a character that has left home, they're in search of something, and they are looking to get this thing. Maybe it's a remedy, maybe it's an ancient tome, something of that nature. They've left wherever they were in search of something more. They've gotten power along the way, and they are looking to find that. That's why they've joined a group of adventurers, etc., etc. It's your job then to put the thing they're looking for in the story. That may be fairly obvious, but there may be some more obtuse things, like maybe along the way you could have them run into someone else who's looking for that thing. How does that link into their story? Maybe that someone else is part of someone else's story, and that's where you really get to start cooking, is where you can get to combining characters' narratives. And it's those character narratives that you can interface, where you originally just had, oh, I have this one character, this one player, who wants to have a character story that they're looking for something. And then you put that thing somewhere inside the story. But then it's another thing to go, okay, and what if one of the other players knows of an NPC, and that NPC was also looking for it, and you run into it, and then you have a see, and maybe that NPC was part of a negative part of that player's backstory. You get to go from there. But sometimes it is really easy, and sometimes it is really, really hard. If you're playing a campaign like I am, which is pre-written, Descent into Avernus, and you have a warlock whose patron is Zariel, the person who commands the first layer of hell, Avernus, very, very easy to write a character story for that. A little bit harder when you have another character who is trying to do something completely different. And this is a very big distinction, in my opinion, between a pre-written campaign and your own written campaign. Because again, with a pre-written campaign, and again, I'm still pretty novice to being a dungeon master. I've been playing and DMing for 3 years now. I'm DMing for 3 years. So still a novice on my first campaign. But having that structure is really nice, because if you know, and again, you don't have to have a written campaign, as long as you know what the kind of the long form narrative is for your campaign, and you don't need to know the specifics, but like where your story is going, you can reasonably start adding things in. So what things can we actually choose to add in? I personally believe that the most important thing that you can add in are the things that you question your characters on. What does that player want to experience? Do they have any concept of what they would like to be challenged with? And if you don't know that, sometimes it's okay to leave their character story for a little bit, let them play their character, see what emerges, and then you'll get inspired by like, yes, I see that this person wants to play a more pacifistic role. You know, they want to play more of a protector. They've shown me that they're kind of battling with the idea of like violence. Okay, put violence in front of them and see how they react. Not only that, give them opportunities where their protection matters. Like, give them an important NPC that them successfully surviving or them not being injured at all, or maybe even just having someone by their side, specifically that character, is rewarded for. And then have that pay off multiple times throughout the story. And then how do we actually go about having something pay off multiple times throughout the story? You can either have this, in my opinion, be a payoff that you try and target around the character, or a payoff that you use like an NPC or an adjacent force to drive. So an example for me would be, you can pay off a character's story by like using like a magic item. That's one way of doing it. It's an external force. You could have a recurring NPC that they run into. It's another external force. You could also have it be them themselves. The actual action you're doing is you're putting a conflict in front of them, and then how that player comes out of that conflict, how they resolve that, and how they choose to move through the world, that's another way to go about doing it. And all of them are valid, all of them matter. But I've just done a very general overview. Let's talk very specifically about integrating a character's narrative into a world story. So a world story is that long form narrative, kind of what the entire group is trying to do. The character story should be uniquely distinct in that it is a singular thing for that character to resolve themselves. The hit game Baldur's Gate 3 has character stories. If we imagine, and I will go into some very light spoilers for Baldur's Gate 3, the whole narrative of Baldur's Gate 3, from the moment you get the tadpole to the very end of the game, with no extra spoilers for that, is the process of trying to free yourself from the tadpole, and then the resolution of whether or not that's actually possible, and then deciding what's worth doing in the absence or presence of the possibility to save yourself, and making those choices. That's the long form narrative, is like, we've been infected, we need to figure something out, and after you figure that something out, what do we do with ourselves after that? There's still an imminent threat. Do we deal with that? Do we let it, like, what's that choice for you? However, along the narrative of a Baldur's Gate 3, you only get a group of 4 people to play with. You only have 4 character slots, including yourself. So 3 other NPCs. which means that if you play the game with, let's say you play the game with these same 3 NPCs, you start with 3 NPCs, you just play with those NPCs, obviously you can swap them out. You will only experience those characters' character stories. All of those character stories are unique, and each playthrough would be different if you'd had different NPCs. So each of those individual narratives is the character story. Now, I don't want to be too spoilery for those character stories, but if the general narrative is trying to free yourself from the Mind Flayer's influence, the individual character stories can be really tied into that or really tied out of that. So for instance, Lae'zel's character story is really tied into that. She's a Gith. This is like a massive thing for her. Her personal character story is learning if it's possible, which is part of the main narrative, and then the revelations that come as a result of that. And then everything after that revelation is her character arc. It is her character story. The choices that she makes, the choices that she realizes. If you were to play as Lae'zel, it would be whether or not she agrees with, what's going on with Orpheus, if she, ends up warming up to the Emperor, things like that. That would be Lae'zel's unique character story. And if you didn't have Lae'zel in the party, you'd still have the main story, but you wouldn't have experienced all of those interesting things, those unique lines of dialogue that come from reading the discs, for instance. That's a character story. I'll give you a different example, one that's a bit more detached from the actual through line. Aside from the fact that they need to get rid of the tadpole to survive, the actual through line, it's very different. A character let's see, who should we go for? I mean, you could go with Gale, Karlach, or Shadowheart here. You can go with Astarion if you really wanted to. I'm going to go with, who am I more comfortable talking about? Probably Shadowheart. Yeah, let's go with Shadowheart, right? Shadowheart's story obviously is intrinsically linked to the main story in that she's been given a plot device. But what she goes through, her revelations, completely separate from the through line of we need to deal with the tadpoles. Her story is, I lost my memories. What does it mean to worship a god? Especially in the absence of knowing who you are. How much are you willing to sacrifice to be something for someone else? What happens when you learn about what that entity cares about and does? And moving through that. And that's a very different story. And again, if you have Shadowheart in the party, you're rewarded for learning all of those extra things. But if she's not there, the through line still exists. And so for you, when you're looking to create or develop a character's unique character story, again, with the very explicit purpose of giving them individual narrative payoffs throughout the campaign, which are agnostic or different from the main through line. Because it's really rewarding to go through that main story and we found the tadpoles, we go and we look for a cure, we can't find a cure, we keep looking, we realize we're a little bit fucked. We keep going. We find answers in the Shadowfell, in the Underdark. We keep going. Oh fuck! This is way bigger than just us getting cured. That's rewarding, but it's also really rewarding. What the fuck is Gale's deal? Gale, you save him with feeding him magic items. He opens up to you. You learn that he's been cursed. You run into Elminster, one of the premier wizard of D&D. He's one of the most powerful wizards in D&D. What the fuck is he doing here? Why does he know Gale? You learn about what Mystra, the goddess of magic, has told Gale to do. What does Gale choose to do? You're presented with an opportunity to use Gale to end the game. What do you do with that? How do you keep going? Those are unique character moments for Gale. Playing through those moments is what you should feel like as a character. You should feel oh, fuck, I'm in the position where I get to actually decide if this is how I end or how it goes out. Is this what I want to do? If Karlach gets her furnace repaired, and then she's encouraged to start using soul coins for power, but then what's the cost of that? Those are character choices that a player character would make. And your choices to do that and what comes as a result of the story, that's what's really important, because those are things which you get to choose. But it's very important if you're a DM to know where and how frequently you can really pay these things off, because you can tee things up for a very, very long time. Some of my most successful character stories took a full year to see resolution. I wrote my warlock in my party's contract. I wrote out their contract And I was like, amazing, I have this written up. I had to write it in like an evening because they were going to, in the next session, affirm their deal with Zariel. And so I was like, well, they're going to get their contract. One thing you need to know about this warlock, they are illiterate. They are functionally unable to read. However, part of being a warlock, one of the eldritch invocations that you can get is that you can like comprehend all languages. And so there was a non-negotiable thing that like this character would choose the ability to comprehend all languages to learn how to read. They didn't. It took a whole year for them to do that. We only got it last weekend, like 2 weekends ago, when they decided, oh look, there's the ability to learn how to read. They'd completely forgotten about the fact that that ability even existed to them. They read it, and now they know what their contract says. And now that narrative moment has paid off. And it's actually paid off at a perfect time because it's tying in with other things happening in the story. You can't predict all of these things, but it's important to write them. It's important to talk about them with your players. I as a dungeon master, or you as a player, if you're a player, get really invested in like where your character's going, especially what things you want your character to be challenged by. I talked about a pacifist character earlier. If you're a pacifist, have violence put in front of you and see if you change your mind. Will you become violent in order to stave off greater violence? Or is your capacity to protect genuinely so great that you can do that? And then as a dungeon master, reward that. Give them more powerful defensive magic. Give them a unique ability that like rewards them being protective. Allow them to like offset, like give them unique things. I like to mess around with like the power system of D&D so much anyway. In my opinion, have more power than less power. That's just me. But in order to pay off those things, you want to have really good communication between dungeon master and player. If the player is new, they may not know what they want to experience. So watch what they do. Take notes. Look at who they are trying to be. Look at who they are, because they will reveal themselves. When they're laughing, when they're giggling, when they're grinning, when they've put their knife between a gut of an orc, you will see who they are. Reference that to their backstory, and then, I know you're smart. Throughline it. Don't use ChatGPT, fuck AI. Think. Use your head. Go, what would be interesting for this player? And yeah, sure, you may get it wrong, but most of the time, you'll get it right. Because your players like what you're writing. The players like your experience. Your players are adult humans who've decided to come to a common place or go online and play a game with their friends or with strangers, whatever it may be, consistently. Give yourself more credit. You are smart, you're intelligent, you are not just in command, you are driving this ship. And you're capable of writing that story and making it pay off. And if you actually need more specific examples, ask me on TikTok. Like literally come over and like ask. I reply to so many different things. But we're gonna wrap up the video here. I hope I've been a bit more cohesive about this. If I was not cohesive about this at all, give me feedback. One of the most important things that I can hear from this is where I was being a bit wishy-washy. And if that's, to my detriment, then so be it. The most important thing for me is that I did this, I learned, and I think I communicated something worthwhile, and hopefully I'll get better at this as time goes on. One thing I can say is that this was one of the most enjoyable experiences. It was the most enjoyable experience I did today. So thank you for listening, look after yourself, and remember that the best communication is the one that you share with other people, the ones that you voice, not the ones that you keep locked up here. Other people want to hear your stories. I know I want to hear when my players want to talk to me about their character. One of the most flattering things that they can say is, hey, can we sit down and like talk about some stuff? Yes. So if you're a player, know that your dungeon master, you're not a burden to your dungeon master. Dungeon masters, please be so vocal about the fact that your players can sit down and talk to you. It is a blessing to have players. It is a blessing to have a dungeon master. If you are looking to step behind the stage and be the dungeon master, know that you can do it. I've done it, other people have done it. I know I speak with an air of confidence. I'm just a confident person. But you can do it. It's possible. And it will be good. If you've ever thought that you could do it, even slightly, you can do it so much better than you could ever think about it. So go do it. And if you're lucky enough to be a player, respect that. Understand the gravity that comes with like stepping behind that stage. Be grateful. And maybe step behind that stage yourself. You can do it, whatever you choose. I just hope you guys are playing D&D. Look after yourselves. I'll see you whenever I see you next. But this has been the most fun thing I have done today. So, Don't expect anything too consistent. This is just me talking about stuff that I like. But look after yourselves. See you soon.